Picture this. You've finally reached the sanctuary your grandfather carved from the wilderness, only to be confronted by an HOA president declaring you an intruder. A woman who claims she owns the very mountain beneath your feet. Have you ever anticipated a peaceful escape, only to find you've wandered directly into the eye of another person's hurricane? That is precisely where our story begins, with Devin Randall's knuckles white on the wheel of his dusty Ford F-150 as the pavement gave way to a winding path ascending into the heart of the Blue Ridge Mountains. These were the peaks that had framed his entire life, but this journey felt different. At 44, he wasn't merely a visitor to the cabin, the one his father had raised from the ground with his own two hands. No, he was here to reclaim a piece of his soul, a history that had stood for over 60 years. It was a structure weathered by time, yet standing proud, nestled between ancient maples and oaks, just distant enough from the blacktop to feel like a world unto itself. The journey had been a long one, the kind of drive where the silence in the cab becomes your only companion. Devin had lowered the windows just enough to let in that crisp mountain air, the kind that always felt purer the higher you climbed. Soon, the road narrowed to gravel, and he could almost hear his father's voice. "Son, when you hear those stones crunching under the tires, that's how you know you're almost home." The memory struck him with an unexpected force. His dad had been gone for almost a decade, yet this land, this very soil, still seemed to echo with his voice. Devin had made a silent vow to keep the spirit of this place alive, even when his life and work in Charlotte conspired to keep him away. This weekend was his long-awaited chance to make good on that promise. He finally pulled into the familiar clearing and killed the engine. For a long moment, the silence was absolute, broken only by the soft ticking of the cooling metal and the gentle rustle of leaves in the canopy above. The cabin stood before him, its rough-hewn logs stained dark by the passing of seasons. Its tin roof bore spots of rust like medals of honor, but it remained solid. To Devin, it was the very definition of perfect. He swung the door open and stepped out, stretching the long miles from his back before heading to the truck bed. He'd packed simply, a cooler filled with provisions, a sleeping bag, a precious stack of old photo albums rescued from his mother's attic, and a trusty box of tools, just in case the old place needed a bit of patchwork. He slung his duffel over one shoulder and carried the cooler toward the worn front step. The door groaned open on his first try, almost as if the house itself had been waiting for him. Dust motes danced in the shafts of afternoon light. As he set his gear down, the air filled with the familiar scents of pine, old ash, and the faint, ghostly aroma of his father's pipe tobacco. Devin traced a hand over the wooden mantel, where the carvings of his youth remained, his own initials etched right beside his father. It was indelible proof of the summers they had shared here. Stepping back into the crisp air, he knew he had to get a fire started before nightfall. The old stone fire pit, the one his dad had built with rocks pulled from the river, was still there, encircled by overgrown grass. Devin crouched, meticulously stacking the kindling. He struck a match with care, watching as the tiny flame eagerly caught hold. The subsequent crackle and spreading warmth settled something deep within his chest. This was the reason he came. It wasn't just to escape the city, it was to remember that some roots run far deeper than any concrete or pavement. And traffic. As the fire grew stronger, he retrieved one of the photo albums and began to turn the delicate pages. There they were, in stark black and white. His grandparents, standing proudly in this very clearing. His father, just a boy, perched fearlessly on the porch rail. And then, a photo of himself as a child, all skinned knees and holding a fishing pole. This place was so much more than just land. It was a legacy. Devin leaned back in his camp chair, his gaze fixed on the dancing flames, allowing the profound quiet of the mountain to seep into his very bone. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, a sense of peace washed over him. The crushing weight of deadlines, designs, and the city's relentless chaos finally melting away. Out here, he wasn't a cog in the machine, a designer drowning in stress. He was simply his father's son, a guardian of his inheritance. But tranquility is a fragile thing, and just when you believe you're truly alone, that's when the outside world decides to intrude. Devin had only just begun to sync with the mountain's pulse, when the sharp crackle of tires on gravel shattered the silence. At first, he dismissed it as a passing neighbor, but this cabin was at the end of a long, secluded lane where visitors were an anomaly. He squinted, his eyes catching the unwelcome glint of a silver SUV through the trees. It snaked its way into the clearing, coming to a halt just past his fire pit. From it emerged a woman. She was clad in a crisp blouse and tailored slacks, her hair coiled in a severe bun that screamed boardroom, not backwoods. She held a leather-bound notebook to her chest as if it were a shield, a symbol of her authority. Her piercing gaze swept over Devon, the cabin, and even the cooler by his feet, taking inventory before she uttered a single word. "You are not permitted to be here." The words were sharp, sterile, as if practiced. Devon rose slowly, deliberately brushing the ash from his hand. "Afternoon," he offered, his voice carefully neutral. "This is my family's cabin. I'm just up for the weekend." The woman ignored his greeting entirely, stepping forward, her impractical heels digging into the soft earth. "Your family's cabin?" she scoffed. "That's amusing. I'm responsible for this entire ridge, and I've certainly never seen you." Devon tilted his head, studying her. "And you would be?" "Margot Finley, president of the Ridgeway Estates, Homeowners Association." She lifted her chin, as though the title itself was a declaration of power. "This entire area is under our jurisdiction. We have regulations, occupancy, property standards, even who is permitted to be here." A soft, disbelieving laugh escaped Devon. It wasn't mockery, but pure incredulity. "Ma'am, with all due respect, this land has been in my family since the 1950s, long before Ridgeway Estates was even a thought. My father built this cabin with his own 2 hands." Margot's lips pursed into a thin, dismissive line. "I'm not interested in your family stories. I know every single property owner within a 3-mile radius, and you are not on that list. You need to pack your things and vacate the premises before I'm forced to take further action." Devon's posture stiffened, his patience wearing dangerously thin. "I think you're the one who doesn't understand. I have the deed. I have the tax records. I have photographs of 3 generations of my family, right here on this very land." He gestured emphatically toward the cabin. "You have no authority here." For a tense moment, the only sound was the crackling of the fire. The silence stretched between them. Margot shifted her weight, tightening her grip on the notebook as her eyes darted to his truck, then back to him, as if she were cataloging evidence for a future confrontation. "The rules are the rules," she stated, her voice rigid. "This community does not permit unapproved structures." She jabbed a finger toward the cabin, "and that is not compliant." Devon's voice took on a hard edge. "This cabin is not part of your community. You cannot enforce your HOA. Rules on land that has never been part of your development. I don't know how I can make that any plainer." Margot closed the distance between them, lowering her voice, but the sharp, cutting tone remained. "Listen, I don't know who you are or what your real purpose is for being here, but people like you don't own property in this area. You need to leave. Now, before I make a call that you will most certainly regret." The words hung in the air, heavy with menace. It wasn't just her words, it was the accusation hanging in the air. A fire ignited in Devon's chest, but he forced it down. He refused to take the bait. "Make any call you please," he stated, his voice a steady line. "I'm not going anywhere. This is my land. My family's," he declared, "and I am staying." The look on Margot's face soured instantly. A mixture of sheer disbelief and rising fury twisted her features. For a long, silent moment, she just stared, as if weighing whether he was brave or simply a fool. Then, with a sharp snap, her notebook was closed. "Fine," she hissed. "If you refuse to leave of your own accord, I'll handle this myself." She pivoted on her heel, stalking back to her SUV. The slam of the driver's door, a sharp crack in the silence. The sound echoed across the clearing. Devon watched her retrieve her phone, her mouth a flurry of unheard words. She reversed the vehicle, angling it at the edge of the drive for a better view. He didn't need to hear the conversation. He knew exactly who was on the other end of that line. Sinking back into his chair, he stared into the hypnotic dance of the flame. He focused on keeping his breathing even steady. This was not the peaceful weekend he had envisioned, a confrontation with a hostile stranger, an argument over land his family had treasured for generations. But sometimes, the moment you plant your feet is the exact moment someone else decides to shove. Margot didn't drive away after the call. She remained, her SUV idling, a silent sentinel with its window rolled halfway down. Her glare was a weapon, as if her mere presence could force him to retreat. Periodically, she'd jot something down in her notebook. Her eyes darted from the page to his cabin, as though she were meticulously documenting a crime scene. Devin had tried to ignore her at first. He focused on the crackling fire, turning the pages of his father's old photo albums. But the tension was a thick static in the air. It was impossible to tune out. Finally, he rose and walked toward her vehicle, deliberately keeping his voice calm. "Is there something you need to ask me?" he said, stopping a respectful distance from her bumper. Margot slowly lowered her sunglasses. Her eyes were narrow slits. "Yes, I want to know who gave you permission to be here. Because from my perspective, you're squatting." Devin nearly laughed at the sheer absurdity. "Squatting? Ma'am, I already told you. This cabin has been in my family for over 60 years. No one gave me permission. I don't need it. I own it." She shook her head, a slow, deliberate motion, her earrings swaying. "No, you don't. People like you, they don't own cabins in the Ridgeway Mountains. You are trespassing, and I have half a mind to inform the sheriff that you're a danger to this community." Her voice rose, echoing through the trees. Devin's patience finally began to fray. "A danger to the community? I haven't so much as raised my voice. I've been right here, minding my own business, tending a fire. The only threat here is you, showing up uninvited and trying to throw your weight around." Margot's jaw tightened, her knuckles white as she gripped the steering wheel. "Don't you dare play clever with me. I've lived here long enough to recognize when something or someone is out of place. And you," her eyes raked over him from head to toe, "you look out of place." A knot tightened in Devin's chest. He wasn't naive. He knew exactly what she was saying. He took a step closer, his boots grinding into the gravel. "Say what you really mean, Margot. You've already shown your hand." For a fraction of a second, her confident gaze wavered before the mask snapped back into place. "This entire ridge is community property now. I'm safeguarding what we've established, something a person like you could never comprehend. You simply don't belong here." Her words struck him with a familiar sting, a phrase that had echoed throughout his entire life. Asterisk, you don't belong, asterisk. Yet, here he was. His feet were firmly planted in the very earth where his father had taught him to fish, to wield a hammer, to meticulously stack logs, until the walls of their cabin rose, solid and true. If he had no place here, then who on earth did? "Let me make one thing clear," he began. He declared, his voice now laced with steel. "When your precious HOA was nothing more than a set of blueprints on a developer's desk, my family was already calling this ridge home. My grandfather felled timber on this very ground, and my father poured his life's sweat into this soil. Every single nail in that cabin is a testament to our history, and I will not stand by while you try to erase it, just because some piece of paper makes you think you're the queen of this mountain." Margot's face flushed a deep crimson. "You can spin your little stories all day long, but I have no need to argue with you. The sheriff is already on his way, and believe me, when he arrives, you'll wish you had just packed your things and disappeared quietly." "Good," Devin retorted. "Perhaps he can explain the actual law to you, since you clearly don't grasp it." For a tense moment, they locked eyes, the only sound being the birds chirping overhead, filling the suffocating silence. It was an almost surreal soundtrack to their bitter confrontation. Margot was the first to break the standoff, raising her window halfway. She retreated back to the cold glow of her phone. Devin turned, walked back to his chair, and forced himself to sit. A slight tremor ran through his hands, not from fear, but from pure, unadulterated frustration. His father's image surfaced in his mind. He remembered the old man's mantra, "Patience is strength. Don't fight fire with fire," he used to say. Devin desperately tried to heed that advice now, but his gut was twisted in knots. Inside the cabin, he gathered the deed and the property tax receipts. He had brought them for this very reason. If deputies were on their way, he would be prepared. He laid the documents out neatly on the porch table, right beside the old photo album, a visual record of his father and grandfather. Evidence, proof. From her SUV, Margot continued her surveillance. Its engine remained running, a faint curl of exhaust ghosting into the cool mountain air. Every so often, she would raise her phone and snap a picture of the cabin or of his truck, as if she were meticulously building a case against him. Devin could only shake his head. The absurdity of it all was overwhelming, sitting on his own land, preparing to prove he even belonged. But surreal or not, this was his reality now. Sometimes, the most venomous accusations precede the greatest storm. The fire in the pit had dwindled to mere glowing embers. By the time Margot's voice cut through the quiet again, Devin had almost allowed himself to believe she would give up and leave. But then he heard the sharp, clinical edge to her tone. Her words carried with chilling clarity through her partially open window. "Yes, officer? I need someone dispatched out here immediately." She spoke into her phone, enunciating each syllable with loud, deliberate precision. "There's a man trespassing on private property. He's refusing to vacate the premises, and I don't feel safe." Devon's jaw tightened. The malicious twist of her words was unmistakable. She was painting him as a threat when he hadn't so much as stepped an inch beyond his own property line. He stood, shaking his head in disbelief, and called out to her. "Are you really going to stand there and lie like that? You're calling the law on me while I'm on my own land?" Margot completely ignored him. Her gaze was fixed on some distant point, as if he didn't exist. "Yes, I'll remain on site until the deputies arrive. I want him removed immediately." Then, lowering her voice just enough that she thought he couldn't hear, she muttered with pure venom, "People like him. They're always the ones who cause trouble." A wave of nausea washed over Devon. Every instinct screamed at him to charge over, rip the phone from her grasp, and silence the insanity, but he forced himself to stand down. He knew that escalating the situation would be futile. Instead, he calmly collected the documents from the porch table, organizing them methodically into a folder. He tucked it securely under his arm. If deputies were truly coming, he would be prepared. Yet the minutes that crawled by were thick with unspoken tension. Margot remained encased in her SUV, its headlights slicing a ghostly white beam across the clearing, an artificial glare against the encroaching twilight. Her eyes darted nervously between Devon and the empty road, a silent challenge daring him to make one false move before her cavalry arrived. Devon sought refuge in simple tasks, cinching the ropes on a stack of firewood and taking a slow sip of water from his thermos, anything to quell the storm inside. But the oppressive silence bore down on him, growing heavier with each passing moment, and he summoned the memory of his father's voice, calm, patient, a steady anchor. It was a reminder that truth carried its own gravity, though that wisdom did little to ease the agonizing weight. Roughly 15 minutes later, a new sound emerged. The far-off crunch of tires on gravel finally broke the stillness as two Sheriff's Department SUVs materialized between the trees. Strobes of muted blue and red pulsed silently against the tree trunks. The moment they appeared, Margot scrambled from her vehicle. She began waving her arms frantically, as if signaling a rescue helicopter in a disaster zone, her voice shrieking, "Over here! This is the man I warned you about." Devon remained rooted to his spot, the folder a solid weight in his hand, his heart hammering but his posture unwavering. Two deputies emerged, clad in tan uniforms. One was older, his face a roadmap of experience, the other younger, his eyes sharp and observant. Both men kept their hands poised near their service belts, a gesture of readiness, but made no move to draw. "Ma'am, please calm down." The senior deputy spoke, holding a placating hand toward Margot. "We're going to get this sorted out." His gaze then pivoted to Devon. "Sir, could you explain what's happening here?" Before Devon could utter a single word, Margot cut in, her accusations spilling out in a breathless torrent. "He broke into that cabin. That structure is completely unapproved. It violates every single one of Ridgeway's building codes. He's a trespasser, and he's been intimidating me. I want him removed from this property immediately." The younger deputy's eyes flicked over to Devon, appraising his composed stance. He noted the folder tucked neatly under his arm and the soft, steady glow of the fire pit behind him. "Sir," the deputy repeated, his tone measured. Devon's voice was even cutting through the tension. "Deputy, my name is Devon Randall. This cabin is my family's property. It was constructed in the 1950s by my father. I have the deed, the property tax receipts, and photographs to prove it, right here." Without a moment's hesitation, he extended the folder. The older deputy stepped forward and accepted it, flipping through the contents with a practiced, careful eye. The rustling of paper seemed unnaturally loud in the charged atmosphere as his brow creased in concentration before he passed a single page to his younger partner. The younger man studied it under the pulsing emergency lights as Margot's face flushed with rage. "Don't believe him. Anyone can forge documents. He has no right to be here. I told you, I own this entire ridge." Devon couldn't resist. "You own your HOA's development, Margot. Not my cabin, not my land." The younger deputy arched an eyebrow at her. "Ma'am, this deed appears to be entirely legitimate. It's dated, notarized, and the parcel number is a perfect match with the county records." Margot scoffed. her voice starting to crack under the strain. "You don't get it. I run this mountain. He's a liar. He's dangerous." Devin exhaled slowly, giving a weary shake of his head. "I came up here for peace, to remember my father. Instead, I'm forced to stand here and justify my family's very existence on our own land that we've worked for 3 generations. Do you honestly believe I would forge legal documents just for the privilege of sitting by a fire?" The older deputy let out a long, tired sigh, rubbing the back of his neck. "All right, let's everyone just take a breath. No one is getting taken away tonight. We'll get this all sorted out." But as Margot's tirade intensified, a crucial realization dawned on Devin. The truth might have been his ally, but he knew that sometimes sheer volume is as potent as any fact, and when reason fails, desperation takes over. They simply double down with noise. The 2 deputies stood there for a moment, one of them holding Devin's official documents. The other watched Margot pace back and forth as if she were rallying voters, while the fire crackled softly behind them. It cast dancing shadows across the cabin's weathered porch. Devin kept his posture straight, his breathing controlled. Despite the fact that his own pulse was pounding like a war drum in his ears, the senior deputy, whose badge read Sergeant Lowell, adjusted his glasses and examined the pages once more. "Mr. Randall, these papers are perfectly clear. The deed has the official county stamps, and the tax receipts are in order year after year. Everything seems to check out." But Margot refused to back down. She lunged forward, pointing an accusatory finger directly at Devin. "He's pulling a fast one on you. You don't know him like I do. He just materialized out of thin air, and that cabin is a blatant violation. And I am telling you, it is not permitted. I am in charge of this ridge." Devin found he could no longer remain silent. "You keep claiming you're in charge of this ridge, Margot, but you are not. Your HOA's authority ends 2 miles down the road. This property has no connection to your community. My family has been on this land longer than your homeowners association has even been in existence." Margot whirled around to face the officers. "Do you hear the way he speaks to me? So aggressive, so defiant. This is the exact reason I called you. He is a danger." The younger deputy, his name tag identifying him as Officer Kincaid, tilted his head. His voice was even but sharp. "Ma'am, he has not once raised his voice. He has provided all the necessary paperwork. What precisely has he done that has made you feel threatened?" Margot's mouth flew open, then snapped shut. She fumbled for a justification, finally blurting out, "Just look at him. And look at that truck. Does that look like someone who belongs in a private mountain community?" "He is lying, I know he is." Devin's hands balled into fists at his sides, but he maintained an even tone. "My truck gets me where I need to be. It does not require your seal of approval, and whether you like it or not, I belong here." The silence that followed was suffocating. Even the forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the tension to break. Sergeant Lowell cleared his throat. "All right," he said with authority. "We are not here to play favorites. We are here to keep the peace, and from everything I'm seeing, Mr. Randall possesses every legal right to be here. Ma'am, unless you can present us with proof that contradicts this official documentation, there is very little more we can do." Margot's face twisted into a mask of outrage. "Proof? Proof? I am the proof. I have lived here for 20 years. I know every face, every name, and every single lot number. I have never seen him before in my life. That cabin is not even registered under Ridgeway Estates. It's illegal." Devin cut in before the deputies had to state the obvious once more. "Of course it's not registered under Ridgeway Estates. It was built long before Ridgeway was even founded. You can't retroactively enforce your rules on land that you do not own." Officer Kincaid looked at her with a steady gaze. "Ma'am, he is correct. An HOA does not have extended jurisdiction over separate parcels of land. If this cabin is on its own deeded lot and all taxes are paid, it is not under your authority." Her voice cracked, rising in pitch. "So, you're just gonna let him squat here? You're siding with him?" Sergeant Lowell simply gave her a long, hard stare. "Look, nobody is squatting here, and we're not taking sides. Our only allegiance is to the fact." Devin took a deliberate step back, the folder clutched in his hand, his posture unwavering. "Officers, I appreciate you coming out here. I'm not looking for any trouble. I came to spend the weekend in peace and honor my father's memory. That's it. But I will not be chased off my own property, simply because someone has decided I don't look the part." For a fleeting moment, Kincaid's jaw clenched. He understood completely. Lowell readjusted his glasses with a weary sigh, while Margot unleashed a sharp, grating laugh, one laced with more desperation than actual humor. "Fine, have it your way. But when he starts trouble, and believe me, he will, you'll remember that I was the one who warned you. You will all regret not listening to me." She spun around and stomped back to her SUV, slamming the door with a force that made the vehicle shudder, but she wasn't leaving. She remained parked, engine idling, her headlights pinning Devon in their accusatory glare. It was a silent dare, challenging him to make a single wrong move. The deputies exchanged a look. "Mr. Randall," Lowell began, "if she calls us again, we are obligated to return. Keep those documents accessible, just in case. I don't see a problem here personally, but situations fueled by tempers like hers can escalate quickly." Devon nodded, but a knot of tension tightened in his chest. He hadn't done a single thing wrong, and yet he knew the burden of proof would fall on him, over and over again, every time she decided to press the issue. But sometimes, the louder a person screams to protect power they never truly possessed, the more ruthless they become, especially when they feel that power slipping through their fingers. The clearing had become a stage, and every eye was locked on the standoff between Devon and Margot. The deputies were trapped in the middle, caught in the harsh glare of Margot's headlights that sliced sharp lines across the cabin's facade. The light cast long, dancing shadows, adding a palpable weight to the moment. Devon remained rooted to the spot. The folder was his anchor, a symbol of his resolve not to be the first to break. Then, Margot emerged from her SUV again, a notebook now tucked under her arm. Her voice, sharper than before, cut through the night. "Are you not listening to me?" she barked at the deputies. "He is dangerous. He's a liar. You should have him in cuffs, not be standing around here debating property records." Sergeant Lowell subtly shifted his weight. His hands remained steady on his belt. "Ma'am, we have reviewed the documents. They are perfectly consistent with the official county file. This cabin is the property of Mr. Randall's family. Unless you can produce paperwork that proves otherwise, there is no violation here." She threw her arms wide in exasperation. "So what? Anyone can just show up, wave a folder around, and suddenly they own a piece of the mountain? Is that really how things work now?" Devon took a slow, centering breath before he spoke. "This is more than just a folder. These are legally binding documents, stamped and verified. You are welcome to call the courthouse yourself if you doubt their authenticity." Her glare was like ice, trying to cut right through him. "You really think that you can just talk your way into belonging here, don't you? That you can just waltz onto this ridge, lay claim to some shack, and rewrite history?" Devon took a step forward, his voice calm but now edged with steel. "Rewrite history? Ma'am, history is the only reason I am standing here. My father poured his blood, sweat, and tears into building that cabin on this very soil. My grandfather hauled timber from this very forest, long before you ever decided you owned this ridge. You're not defending history. You are actively trying to erase it." The younger deputy, Officer Kincaid, cleared his throat, the sound cutting through the thick silence. "Ma'am, if we're being entirely honest, this cabin predates the entire Ridgeway Estates development. It's a documented fact. We cannot and will not treat it as part of your HOA's jurisdiction." "That's a complete perversion of the law," Margot shot back, her voice dripping with disbelief. "So you're taking his side in this? Are you blind to what's unfolding right before your eyes? He has no place here, and you're just letting him steamroll his way in." Her accusation hit a nerve, and for the first time, Devon's own frustrations boiled over. "Why don't you just come out and say what you're really thinking, Margot? You've been dancing around it since the moment you arrived. This was never about paperwork. This is about someone like me owning this land. Land you believe should only belong to people like you." The words hung between them, sharp and irrefutable, as a deep crimson flush spread across Margot's face, but she offered no denial. Instead, she hissed, "Those are your words, not mine." A suffocating silence descended upon them. Even Sergeant Lowell, a pillar of composure until now, shifted his weight, the unease palpable. Kincaid glanced between them, his lips a thin, tight line. It was Devon who broke the silence, his voice lower now but resonating with conviction. "This cabin is more than just wood and nails. It's the history of my family, and no amount of blustering from a homeowners association president is ever going to erase that." Margot snapped her notebook open, rifling through the pages in a frantic display. Though it was obvious she had nothing of substance to present, her voice trembled with rage. Yet she shouted, "You can stand there with your fabricated history and your forged papers, but this is far from over. If the sheriff's department refuses to do its duty, then Ridgway will. We have standards, we have rules, and people like you are not welcome to." "That's enough," Sergeant Lowell commanded, his voice slicing through her tirade like a knife as he raised a hand. "Ma'am, we will not be arresting a man on his own land without a shred of credible evidence. That is not the protocol of this department. You've lodged your complaint, we have conducted our investigation, and as of this moment, the matter is closed. Should you continue to harass this man, you will be the one facing charges." Margot's jaw fell, her indignation so pronounced it was almost theatrical. "Charges? Against me? I am protecting my community." Kincaid's voice, now stripped of its earlier patience, cut in. "Protecting your community does not grant you jurisdiction over land you don't own. This has nothing to do with Ridgway. This is about one man, on his own property. If you cannot accept that, then the problem isn't him, it's you." Devin finally released a breath. He hadn't realized he'd been holding it. For once, the deputy's authority drowned out her venom, but he knew with chilling certainty this was only a temporary ceasefire. People like Margot never just retreat. They regroup, rearm, and return with even more firepower. He glanced toward the fire, its flames now embers, the smoke curling lazily towards the trees. All he wanted was to sink back into his chair, crack open a beer, and erase this entire encounter. But the crushing weight of the standoff remained heavy on his shoulders. Because sometimes, when the truth is undeniable, people don't concede. They just find a new angle of attack. The immediate confrontation may have subsided, but Devin saw that Margot was far from done. Her chest heaved with short, sharp breaths, her hands clenching and unclenching at her sides, as if warring between the urge to scribble another note and the desire to point an accusing finger at him once more. The deputies maintained their professional calm, but the atmosphere had curdled. What began as a simple property dispute had devolved into something much uglier, a wound that cut far deeper than any deed or tax record could show. Margot took another step forward, her heels ground into the loose gravel. "Do you want to know what the real problem is?" she hissed. "It's that people like you think you can just show up here, believing you can lay claim to whatever you please. You buy your way in, and then everything, the entire community, starts to decline. I have witnessed this before, and I will not permit it to happen again." The words weren't yelled this time. They were uttered quietly, with a chilling coldness that was somehow far more menacing. Officer Kincaid shifted his weight, his discomfort obvious as he glanced at Sergeant Lowell, as if silently asking whether they ought to intervene. Devin stood his ground. "I didn't buy my way in," he stated, his voice low yet unwavering. "My family bled for this land long before you, even knew these mountains existed. We never needed a gated entrance or a homeowners committee to tell us we belonged. We simply built our lives here." Margot's lips twisted into an expression that was half sneer, half smile. "That's the story you tell yourself. But land doesn't belong to people like you forever. Eventually, it changes hands. It gets cleaned up, civilized. And I will personally see to it that this ridge remains that way." The insult was no longer about regulations, it was about heritage. It was about who had the right to stand on this ground. Devin felt a fire ignite in his chest, but he recalled his father's lessons on patience. He chose his next words with precision. "Civilized," he repeated slowly. "You believe painting a fence white and drafting a set of bylaws makes you the savior of this mountain? My father drove every single nail into that cabin with his own 2 hands. My grandfather hauled stone from the riverbed to build that fire pit. If that isn't civilized, then I don't know what is." For a long moment, even the deputies were silent. The fire hissed as a log collapsed, sending a spray of sparks into the night. Then, Sergeant Lowell cleared his throat. "Ma'am, this conversation is no longer productive. Mr. Randall has provided documents proving his ownership. We've already warned you about harassment. Unless you wish to face charges yourself, I strongly suggest you return to your property." Margot spun to face him, her face flushed and her voice cracking with fury. "So you're simply going to take his side? After everything I've explained? You're ignoring me, the one trying to protect Ridgway, while he's the one trespassing." Kincaid stepped forward then, his tone firm. "Ma'am, you've made severe allegations with absolutely no evidence. Meanwhile, Mr. Randall has supplied irrefutable proof. If you continue to escalate this situation, it will not end in your favor." For the very first time since her arrival, Margot faltered. The blaze in her eyes flickered, and her mouth fell open, but no sound emerged. It was a minuscule crack in her armor, but Devon saw it. He leaned in slightly, his voice calm but razor-sharp. You've constructed your entire sense of authority on rules you invented for people who agreed to live by them, but those rules don't apply here, and no matter how loudly you shout, you cannot change the truth. This cabin is mine. This land is mine, and somewhere deep down, you know that. Margot's fists clenched, her knuckles turning white. But she didn't move any closer. She looked to the deputies one last time, searching for an ally and finding only stone-faced duty. The silence stretched on, thick with the weight of all that was left unsaid. Then, as if she couldn't contain it, Margot snapped, "This is not over. Do you hear me? I don't care what kind of papers you wave in my face. This is not over." Her voice ricocheted off the surrounding trees as she stormed back to her SUV. She wrenched the door open and slammed it with enough force to make the entire vehicle shudder. But she didn't turn the key. She just sat, her headlights glaring across the clearing like a predator's eyes, fixed on Devon. Sergeant Lowell let out a long breath, slowly shaking his head. "Mr. Randall, we're going to remain here for a few more minutes, just to ensure things don't escalate further." Devon gave a slight nod, though his hands remained balled into tight fists at his side. He gazed back at the fire, its glow now a gentle pulse, and marveled at how swiftly tranquility could shatter into open hostility. It always began when someone felt entitled to the world around them, because the real turning point in a conflict isn't when the proof is laid bare. It's the moment someone finally reveals the true nature they've been concealing. For now, the deputies remained. Their patrol cars were stationed at the clearing's edge, their red and blue lights painting the trees in silent, rhythmic flashes of authority. For Devon, those few moments stretched into an eternity, feeling far longer than the entire journey up from Charlotte. Margot, however, remained in her SUV. Its headlights pinned him in a harsh glare, like the lamps of an interrogation room. She had no intention of leaving, and as it happened, neither did the others. Drawn by the disturbance, a new set of lights emerged from down the gravel road, piercing the darkness. Then another followed. Within 30 minutes, a small convoy of vehicles had assembled at the property line. Neighbors, their curiosity piqued by the unusual sight of sheriff's cruisers and Margot's SUV, all gathered in one spot. Car doors creaked open, and voices began to slice through the cool mountain air. "Margot, what in the world is happening out here?" A man called out as he emerged from a red pickup. His name was Edgar Hensley, a tall man in his 50s. He wore a baseball cap pulled down low, and right behind him was his wife, Sharon, who instantly folded her arms and fixed Devon with a hard stare. Her expression made it clear she'd already passed judgment. Seizing her moment, Margot sprang from her SUV, clutching her notebook like a hard-won prize. "Finally, someone else to witness this," she declared. "This man is a trespasser. I caught him forcing his way into that old shack, and now he's trying to claim it's his. I called the sheriff's department to have him escorted off the property." In response, Devon took a deliberate step forward. He held his folder aloft for everyone to see. "That shack is my family's cabin, built in the 1950s, and this is the deed. Here are the tax records, and here are photographs of 3 generations of my family living on this land. I am not pretending, and I am not trespassing." Edgar faltered, his gaze shifting from the deputies to Margot. "Is that right?" Officer Kincaid gave a single, firm nod. "It all checks out. We've reviewed the documents. The land belongs to him." But Sharon remained unconvinced. "If it's really his, then why has no one ever seen him before? We've been living up on this ridge for nearly 10 years, and I've never once laid eyes on him." Devon's patience was wearing thin, but he forced his voice to remain steady. "That's because my life is in Charlotte. I come up here whenever I can. I have a full-time job, and sometimes life just gets in the way. But this property has been in my family since long before Ridgeway Estates was even a concept. The fact that you haven't seen me doesn't mean I don't belong here." At that, another neighbor, a younger woman named Colleen Ramirez, spoke up. She stepped forward, a frown creasing her brow. "Wait a minute, Margot. Didn't you tell us the HOA only has authority over Ridgeway properties? His cabin isn't part of Ridgeway, so why should it matter to any of us what he does on his own land?" Margot's head whipped around to face her, her eyes flashed with fury. "It matters because when outsiders start showing up, our standards begin to erode. It starts with one little cabin, then it's clutter everywhere. And after that, who knows what comes next? I refuse to stand by and watch this ridge degrade into something we'll all come to regret. Colleen crossed her arms, unimpressed. That cabin has been standing here a lot longer than your HOA has existed, Margot. Maybe you should stop acting like you own the entire mountain. The crowd stirred uncomfortably, and a few quiet murmurs of agreement could be heard. Sharon muttered something under her breath about maintaining safety, while Edgar looked completely torn. The division among them was now crystal clear. The community was split. Some stood with Margot, while others recognized her tyranny. Devin felt the crushing weight of every stare. Then, for the first time that night, his voice broke the silence, addressing not just Margot, but the entire assembly. "You want to discuss standards?" he challenged, his voice resonating firmly across the clearing. "My grandfather erected this cabin with his own 2 hands. He carried the lumber up this mountain without a single machine, without any assistance. My father raised me here each summer, instilling in me a deep respect for this land. He taught me to work hard and to honor our heritage. That isn't lowering standards, that's creating them." A wave of whispers swept through the crowd. Colleen offered a firm nod of agreement as Edgar stroked his chin in contemplation. Even Sharon's certainty seemed to waver for a moment. Margot, however, became even more defiant. "Don't fall for his sentimental tales. He's playing on your emotions. I am the one who has kept this community pristine, safe, and orderly for 20 years. Without my diligence, Ridgeway would crumble. And if we allow him to remain, this is where the decay begins." At that, Sergeant Lowell finally intervened, his voice imbued with an authority that instantly silenced the murmuring. "That's enough. This is not a matter for a community vote. This is private property, and Mr. Randall has provided proof of ownership. Anyone who continues to interfere will be the one in violation of the law." The crowd fell silent, though suspicious. Sideways glances were still exchanged. Edgar mumbled something about it being worth a check at the courthouse, while Sharon shot Margot a complicated look. It was a glance that mingled doubt with her deep-seated loyalty. Meanwhile, Colleen moved closer to Devin. "Don't let her intimidate you," she murmured. "Some of us are well aware she goes too far. You have every right to be here." Devin gave a slight, grateful nod, thankful for the gesture of support. Yet, he knew how precarious that support was. A single ally in a sea of onlookers couldn't negate the pure hostility emanating from Margot, nor could it dispel the suspicion that still lingered in the others. He turned back to the fire, heaving another log onto the blaze. Sparks danced and spiraled into the darkness. He longed for the tranquility his father once cherished here, but the judgment of a fractured community weighed on him, heavy on his shoulders. The tension in the clearing hung thick in the air, a swollen storm cloud poised to burst. Devin held his ground at the fire's edge, while Margot seethed beside her SUV, arms folded, foot-tapping impatiently, as if every passing second of silence was further proof of the deputy's incompetence. The cluster of neighbors hadn't scattered either. Their morbid curiosity kept them anchored in place, whispers flitting from one person to the next. Finally, Sergeant Lowell stepped forward again. He cleared his throat with a sound that commanded attention. "All right, everyone, this ends now. Mr. Randall has presented us with legal documentation. We have verified it. This property belongs to him. End of story." Margot erupted. "So, that's it? You're just going to abandon the matter and leave him here, as if nothing has happened? You're going to allow him to take root here and dismantle everything we have built?" The sergeant's patience finally fractured. His voice rose, firm and sharp. "Ma'am, you have made a series of accusations without a shred of evidence. You have harassed a man on his own private land. If this behavior continues, the next report we file will not be about him. It will be about you." A murmur went through the crowd at his words. A few neighbors shifted on their feet, the sudden turn of the tide making them uneasy. Sharon dropped her gaze to the ground. Edgar let out a low whistle, muttering, "Never thought I'd live to see the day." Margot sputtered, struggling to find her words. She fumbled with her notebook, as if some ordinance written within could still rescue her, but it held nothing more than pages of meticulous, handwritten notes. Lawn heights, paint colors, noise complaints. But none of that mattered now. Seizing the moment, Devin stepped toward the deputies. His voice was level, yet resonated with strength. "Officers, I've presented my documents. You've seen the proof. I am not leaving. This cabin is more than property. It's my family's legacy, and I will defend it with my last breath." Kincaid gave a firm nod. "You don't need to convince us, sir. We understand. He shot a pointed glance at Margot. "And if anyone continues to interfere, we will know precisely how to respond." The words sliced through the night air, final and absolute. But Margot was far from ready to concede. She aimed a trembling finger at Devon. "This is not over. You will regret standing here like you own this place. I'll take this to the HOA, the county, whoever it takes. I'll take it to anyone who will listen. You'll see." Devon met her gaze without flinching. "Take it wherever you like. The truth doesn't bend to your will." The firelight danced across their faces, illuminating his calm resolve and her burning fury. After a tense moment, Lowell gestured toward Margot's SUV. "Ma'am, it's time to go home. You've caused enough trouble for one evening." Slowly, grudgingly, Margot stomped back to her vehicle. She wrenched the door open, slammed it shut, and revved the engine, peeling out down the gravel road as her headlights were swallowed by the darkness. The crowd lingered for a moment, the tension slowly dissipating, before they too began to drift away. Edgar offered Devon a curt tip of his cap. His expression remained unreadable, while Sharon pointedly avoided eye contact altogether. Only Colleen paused, offering a quiet word before she departed. "Don't let her get to you," she said softly. "Your roots here run far deeper than hers ever will. Never forget that." Devon gave her a grateful nod, the weight of exhaustion pressing down on him as the deputies concluded their business. They advised him to call if Margot returned, then settled into their cruisers and drove away. And just like that, a profound silence descended upon the ridge once more. Devon stood alone beside the crackling fire, the warm glow of the flames painting the cabin in hues of orange and gold. His hands, he realized, had finally unclenched, but the ache deep in his chest remained. He glanced down at the folder of documents, still gripped tightly under his arm. What should have been a simple, ordinary visit to his family's land had turned into a battle to defend his very right, to stand on the very soil his father had once tilled. The ordeal left him drained and angry, but also fiercely resolute. He was learning that sometimes victory isn't about shouting the loudest or winning over a crowd. It's about holding your ground. It's about knowing the truth carries more weight than any lie they can hurl at you. As the last pair of headlights vanished, down the road, Devon was finally left with the quiet he had originally come here to find. But it no longer felt the same. The fire still snapped and hissed, but instead of offering comfort, the flames seemed to echo the fiery confrontation that had just unfolded. He sank into his camp chair, the folder resting like a heavy shield on his lap. He stared at the cabin, the one his father built with calloused hands more than half a century ago, and for a long while, he simply let the silence envelop him. His thoughts drifted to his father, a man who always preached patience and dignity, especially when life put him to the test. "Never let anyone take what you know is yours," his dad used to say. Those words now echoed in the quiet, louder than all the shouting, louder even than Margot's venomous accusations. Devon surveyed the clearing, realizing that for him, every single inch of this land held a memory. The very porch where he had sat as a child, legs swinging freely while his father taught him to carve a piece of wood, the fire pit where his grandfather would roast trout caught from the stream nearby. Even the simple dirt path leading to the truck was carved with tire tracks, layered from decades of family visits. This was never just property, it was a living history, a bloodline, and tonight he was nearly forced off it by someone who believed her title, her influence, and her prejudice carried more weight than the truth. The thought gnawed at his soul, but it also forged something of steel inside him. He recognized the fight was never just about him, it was for everyone who was ever told they didn't belong, even when all the evidence screamed otherwise. He leaned back, staring into the deep forest. "Dad," he whispered just above his breath. I held my ground. Overhead, the first stars began to emerge, sharp and brilliant against the mountain's dark canvas. For the first time all night, Devon let himself take a full, deep breath. He knew Margot would be back. Maybe not the next day, maybe not the next week, but eventually, people like her never go down quietly. But Devon now knew he had allies, even if only a few neighbors were courageous enough to speak up, and he possessed something far stronger than all of them: proof, patience, and a legacy that could not be erased. As the flames in the fire pit died down, Devon closed the photo album he had left open on the table. A photograph of his father holding him as a small child smiled back at him. He realized that someday, someone else might sit in this exact spot, defending this cabin from a new kind of challenge. That was the true price of heritage. You didn't just inherit a place, you inherited the solemn duty to protect it. The lesson was heavy, but it was also crystal clear. Some fights are not about winning in the moment. They are about standing firm, showing dignity when others have lost theirs. And in doing so, you are not just defending your name, you are defending the very idea that truth still has power. Devin finally rose, carrying the documents back into the cabin. He set them on the mantel, next to the wooden carvings he and his father had etched together decades ago. Proof of ownership resting beside the proof of memory. The cabin groaned softly as he shut the door, as if it were settling back into its long and silent watch. By morning, the mountain would be quiet once more, and Margot would likely be on the phone, stirring up new trouble. But Devin was certain of one thing. She had not beaten him tonight. She never could, because legacy is always louder than lies. And if there is anything to be learned from Devin's story, it is this. Protect what is yours, not just with words, but with unwavering patience, with dignity, and with truth. Do not let anyone make you believe you don't belong where your roots run deep. And if you have followed this story all the way to the end, I want to leave you with one final thought. If standing your ground with respect and truth is something that matters to you, subscribe to this channel, because stories like Devin's are a reminder that, regardless of how loud and chaotic the world gets, the truth is still worth fighting for.